Hey everybody, happy Tuesday. It is Nancy here from American Pet Professionals, and welcome back to our next episode of Digging into the Pet Industry. I'm so excited for our next guest today, who is APP VIP member Jill Lauri of Healing with Animals. We have a really great show for you today. So if you're interested in learning about all what Jill does, I hope that you tune in. I hope that you ask questions, whether you're watching on Facebook, on YouTube, or here on LinkedIn. So I'm going to go ahead and bring Jill up and we're going to get started. Hey, Jill, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me, Nancy.
Thanks so much for being here today. Happy Tuesday. I hope you are doing well today.
Yes, the sun is shining and it's a good day.
Awesome, awesome. Okay, so let's dig in. We don't mess around here on our show,
Mhm.
digging into the pet industry. I would love for you to tell everybody about your background and how you got into healing with animals, because I know you have a pretty impressive background.
Yeah, well, I came out of the womb adoring animals. I just related to them. I just loved them. I connected with them. And actually, as a child, I really wanted to be a veterinarian.
Okay.
And then when I realized the medical procedures that I would need to do, and particularly euthanasia,
Mm.
I decided that I don't think emotionally I could do that. And so I strayed away from becoming a vet and I sort of went in the other direction. Sometimes I guess when we give up a passion, we go way
On the
over
opposite.
the other direction. And I pursued a career in business. So I have my MBA. And I realized over time that I had overshot it and that I really wanted to be in more of a counseling, helping field.
Okay.
And so I went back, I got a master's in social work, and I counseled people for many years. And one of my focus areas was counseling people who were grieving the loss of animals.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. So with the when you returned to school, that was one of the focus areas.
Yeah, that I sort of developed over time because of my own passion.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I really have to say that the reason behind healing with animals is my inspiration was my dog Misty,
Oh.
who was my beloved. She was my pet child since she was 6 weeks old, and she was diagnosed with cancer at one point.
Mm.
And she was a relatively young dog. And my favorite Misty story is that she was recuperating in surgery after surgery, and there was a big door with a glass that you could peer down, and no animals came out there, but I guess that was as close as I could get to her after her surgery. And after her surgery, nobody could explain how, but she came strutting down the towards the doorway, and I couldn't believe it. But in that moment, despite the fact that the doctors were telling me 0 to 3 months, I knew she had more living to do.
Yeah.
And so what I proceeded to do was look for different healing modalities, which also led me to spirituality. And we had another couple of years together, which gave us the time we needed to say goodbye and let go. So she is really my inspiration for healing
Wow.
with animals, and and I've seen how much potential there is in our relationship with animals for us to
Yeah.
heal, for them to heal.
Yeah, I love that. I love that pet professionals, there's so many wonderful stories like that, that the inspiration, my own dog was an inspiration to get into the pet industry when I was in my 20s. And, I feel like that's something that we're still, developing and learning about even now in 2022 is our relationship with animals and how meaningful it is. So I love that story about Misty. And you
Mm.
hear that, right? I mean, there was, I think, like 2 or 3 years ago here on Long Island in New York, There was a man who had to get rushed to the hospital, and he had, I believe, a white German Shepherd, and he was a couple of miles from the hospital, and the dog somehow got out and ran to the emergency room. He didn't know he
Mm,
was there. He ran. It was all over the news. It was crazy. And
mm.
they were like, well, whose dog is this? And somehow they figured out, maybe it was a name tag or something, that it was that dog. And I was just like, somebody was like, oh, the dog could smell. And I'm like, maybe, but that's pretty far, So it was pretty, and the fact that he didn't get hurt running across some busy roads, he just knew how to get there was really kind of eye opening, I think, for a lot of people to see that connection with the dog. And I believe the guy was okay. So, it was okay, but really interesting. So, let's talk a little bit about what you do at Healing with Animals. A lot of people, they think of the term animal communication or animal communicator, and they don't really fully understand what it is that somebody like yourself does, because you have such an impressive background, and now you're so cognizant of dealing with pets and people with pets and pet professionals with pets. Can you tell me a little bit about what you do? I was looking at your website, and I know you do pet wellness and some pet loss coaching. If you want to jump in wherever you want to get started.
Sure. So communicating with animals, it's something that I do telepathically. So
Okay.
if you think about it mind to mind, like almost like the way a telephone wire works, right? And so, the way that I communicate may be through images, animals may show me pictures, words may pop into my mind. Um, so, it can come in a lot of different forms depending on the particular animal.
Yeah.
And so, what I usually do is I usually check in, say hello to the animal, in my mind.
Hmm.
Sometimes I'll get a sense for the animal, what they feel like. Do they feel solid? Do they feel confident? Do they feel A lot of animals have great senses of humor. Um, and then I, ask them, what do you want to share? And they come up with such amazing things. Sometimes they have advice for their people. Overwhelmingly, they're so full of love for their pet parents. They just adore them and they want the best for them. Sometimes they'll talk about their food. Maybe they want more or less of a certain kind of food. They also talk about, their healing. They have their own ideas about what kinds of procedures or what kind of healing kinds of remedies might be helpful for them. Animals know what's going on, and a lot of times somebody will ask me, does he or she know this, or do they know I'm planning to go away for a couple of weeks? Is it okay with them? And they absolutely know. And the whole thing with animals is, just because they understand what you want of them does not mean they're necessarily going to just go ahead and do it, right? They're their own beings with their own minds and their own sense of what they want for themselves. So sometimes it's sort of a negotiation process. It
Yeah.
could be like, okay, this is what your parent wants. Like, how can we maybe make this happen here? And it's a dialogue. So it ends up being a three-way dialogue where we sort of go back and forth.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like as you're saying that, when it comes to like dog training, right? That's the first thought that popped in my mind. And pet parents getting frustrated with a dog that's maybe not doing what they expect it to do, and the dog's totally thinking of doing something else. I mean, we've all seen the really funny videos. They have minds of their own, right? You might have a really well dog that's trained, but they still have a mind of its own. And I giggled when you said food, because that would be Cody's message to you. Give me more treats. My dog Cody. So that's really interesting. So how do you tie that in with your program for pet wellness?
Well, so one of the things that people come to me with sometimes, and I think the animals bring their people to me, is
Yeah.
what really happens, is instances where there's some kind of emotional struggle or pain in the relationship. And very often that can be around a pet illness.
Mhm.
And so, and it could be something emotional going on, it could be something physical going on. So we have conversations about what the animals want for themselves, right? What they think would be helpful. And then even preemptively, what are the things that you can do to keep me healthy,
Yeah.
to keep my life um, full of joy and pleasure, and it works both ways because we're so connected with our animals that a lot of times the animals want their people to get healthier also, and sometimes animals will act out in ways that perhaps we don't like or we don't understand because that's their way of getting our attention,
Yep.
right? And, sometimes it's because of something going on in them that we're not aware of. And sometimes it's something going on in their pet parents'
Yep.
life that they want to say, hey, wake up, like that relationship's really not healthy for you.
Yeah.
All kinds of things. But overwhelmingly, it's done from a place of love for themselves, love for their people, and they're really on this journey with us to heal with us.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, just on the basic level, if I'm working all day, Cody will eventually sit next to me and just stare. Like,
Mm.
okay, like let's go. We need to go for a walk. You need to get off that screen, you know? And that's just like the most basic thing. And I think a lot of people can relate to that, but they don't always pay attention to that, right?
Mm. Mm. Exactly, and that's what happens when we don't pay attention. Our animals have to sort of up the ante and find ways to get us to pay attention.
Yeah, that was like the nice way. Some dogs or cats, they can get destructive. They can, really make you pay attention in a way that it's the only way that they can figure out to communicate with you if you're not paying attention. So I really love that because I think that, the more we pay attention to our pets, the more that we will actually pay attention to our own lives and what we need to do and not do, right? Especially when it comes to stress and working too much and all of those type of things. And we know that here in the pet industry, everybody's working really hard. So, what do you mean when you offer pet loss coaching? Is that like a bereavement type of service?
Yeah, so for people whose animals are either ill or have passed over, because I communicate with animals who've passed over also, sometimes it's helpful to actually talk with the animal and hear from the animal's perspective how they view life and death. And very often animals look at things very differently and they just say the most profound things. And that can be helpful, in alleviating a lot of the guilt, the regret, the shame that people carry when their animals pass.
Yeah.
And then, in addition to that, I also do pet loss coaching, which is not necessarily communicating with the animal. It's inspired by the animals and
Mhm.
animal wisdom, but it really gives people tools, practical tools to deal with the grief and the loss and to do it in healthy ways.
Yeah, you and I met years ago, Jill, at the Bidewee Pet Memorial, where we
Mm.
were both speaking at it, and it was so beautifully done. I really was not sure what to expect, and it was really beautifully done. They had a lot of people there, and everybody was honoring their pets. And I frankly was kind of blown away by how many people showed up for that and
Mm.
how needed it was for people to talk about it. So my next question for you is with that, have you noticed, in your line of work or any businesses or pet business, not pet businesses, but like mainstream businesses really understanding pet loss now and offering any kind of services to help them? Or do you work with any businesses that do that?
Well, one of the things I'm noticing is that people are starting to get it a little more.
Yeah.
So there used to be a time where if someone felt like they needed some time off because their dog, cat, bird, goldfish, whoever it
Mm.
might be, and again, it's not the particular species of animal, it's the relationship
Right.
that's key, right? That people either felt embarrassed, or if they brought it up, their managers or whoever it might be just didn't get it. They didn't know, or their coworkers would, sometimes say very insensitive kinds of
Yeah.
things, not because they didn't care necessarily, but they just didn't get the
Yeah.
connection and the depth of the connection. I can't tell you how many people have said to me over the years, Jill, I can't believe it. I'm more devastated than when my parents passed.
Yeah.
They just, we're just touched in such deep places with our animals. And so I think more and more mainstream, even people who maybe are not animal people
Yeah.
themselves, are starting to get it a little more, because that's one of the things when you lose an animal is that you feel so lonely in some ways to begin with, but the fact that a lot of people just don't get it or want to minimize the loss,
Yeah.
it can, make it you feel that much more isolated
Yeah,
sometimes.
absolutely. I remember when my Doberman Shanna died, who was my inspiration dog, like your Missy was. And when she passed on a Sunday, and I had to go to work the next day. And I didn't get any work done. I was like in between crying and people talking to me and phone calls and all of the things. I just thought if I had this one day off to, at least grieve the dog for a day, and it's not like I had an insensitive boss. I could have called in sick, but I didn't. And it was just kind of like a waste. There was no productivity that day for
Mhm.
me. And I think that, as we become more pet friendly, right? We see a lot of businesses, especially after the pandemic, posting, bring your pets to work. We're dog friendly places to live, all of that. But I would love to know if anybody has ever reached out to you to work as with a business, like with a corporate business, since you have a corporate background, on how to coach them with dealing with people that have lost a pet, because more than likely they may have lost a pet in their life, and how they can actually do that in a better way. Just a little thought out there if anybody's watching and is a business. I think you could reach out to Jill because she has a lot of insight on it.
Yeah, no, I think that's a wonderful idea, and I think people are becoming more open, and I think that may be one of the things that comes out of COVID. I'm more than willing to work with, any form of entity, whether it's individual or on a corporate basis, to really acknowledge and support our relationships with animals, because I think one of the things that certainly has come out of COVID is people and corporations are seeing that their employees are whole people,
Yeah.
and that all the relationships in their life need to be honored for their employees to show up and be their best selves. And part of that is honoring the relationship with our animals. And
Yep.
the truth is that our animals are our partners in our work also. People don't realize it, but very often, I get my inspiration and ideas from my animals that are physically here and that have passed over. They
Yep.
want to support us and they want to help us in ways that we never imagine.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think that there was a trend anyway, last year anyway, when people were starting to say, okay, time to come back to the office, or even this year, that people that had adopted, a dog or a cat, or like you said, any pet, or they were now home 24/7 with their pets that they already had, they were like, I'm not going back to the office. And so I feel like a lot of businesses have tried to be more accommodating to that because they don't want to lose a really good employee. So yeah, you can still work from home, maybe have some flex time, So I find that really interesting. And that's because of our pets, right? That's because people realize how important, and those pets were there for us during the pandemic, whether, you that was the only animal in your life or the only being in your life while you were in lockdown and everything else. So I think it's really helped in that way, shine a light on it.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey, and I think for many of us, without our animal companions, I mean, I think it would have been that much more stressful, felt
Yep.
that much more intense. Because for many of us, we went for months and months without physical touch, without hugging another human
Yeah.
being, right? And so, if we didn't have our animals, that physical contact can be so important.
Yeah, yeah. And just the stress relief of, having your pet there to pet them, I mean, it's like almost as old as time now, how we always hear about how our pressure gets lowered by just petting a dog or a cat. So it's interesting. So I have another question for you about one of the services that you do that I think is fascinating is helping with animal communication by locating a missing pet. How do you do that?
Mm. So it's the same process. So I'll check in with the pet, um, ask them how they are. Very often, it's interesting because they are our babies. So we think of them as being, in some ways, less able to fend for themselves as than they are. So
Yeah.
sometimes animals are just off on an adventure and a journey. Sometimes they'll want their people to actively look for them. Sometimes they say, "Hey, tell my people I'm fine. I'm just off on an adventure. I plan on coming back." But what happens is that when people um, feel a little more at ease and know that their animal is okay, they can calm down a little bit and have a clearer
Yeah.
mindset with which to make decisions about, what's the best way to address this. Is it putting flyers up all over the place? Is it driving around? Sometimes animals will say, I just want my person to send me love and stay connected to me. And sometimes there's lessons in it also. For many of the people I've worked with, there are lessons in letting go because we can hold on so tight to everything in our lives and everyone, including our animals, that
Yeah.
it's a process of letting go a little bit. And I basically hear what the animals want to share. Sometimes they'll say where they are. Very often, they're just they're just off, and they don't necessarily need immediate help or assistance.
Right, right. Yeah, that's really interesting. And I know there's a lot of people that work in that field and have helped many animals get back home. So I think that's such a great service that you offer. And let's talk a little bit about what you do for the pet professionals. I know that you've been very passionate about veterinarians and the veterinary field in the last couple of years. I know it's been tough on everybody, but it's been very tough on vets. We've seen over the pandemic not being able to go inside with your pets or all of the things that has happened on social media. So, can you tell me a little bit more about what you do for your veterinary coaching?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, veterinarians have really had some challenges during
Yeah,
this period. When you think about it, veterinarians always have at least two patients. They always have the pet and one or more pet parents.
yeah,
And so they're always trying to navigate both clients, both patients.
yeah,
And, the truth is, very often when people bring their animals in, they are very stressed.
right.
They're concerned about their animal, and understandably so. And while veterinarians are trained in the procedural aspects of their work, they typically receive little or no training in the stressors of their work, right? There's
Yep,
no other professional that makes decisions around life and death the way veterinarians do. They literally hold life and death in their hands in
yeah,
terms of euthanizing animals. And that is a big stressor. That is a big responsibility, both emotionally, spiritually, and, without having training in how to hold that, it can be incredibly stressful. And so, I sort of feel, I was thinking about it earlier, that I've come full circle, right? So, from starting out as a
yeah,
child, wanting to be a vet, and deciding that I didn't have the emotional equipment to be able to do it, I kind of went this roundabout path to learn the skills to be able to emotionally be with animals in that way. And so I'm not actually doing the hands on work of a veterinarian now,
right.
but the tools that I have allow me to support them and help them to deal with the stress inherent in their work.
Yeah. So if a veterinarian is watching and they want to reach out to you, how does the program work?
Well, I typically do an initial consultation with a veterinarian
Okay.
just to get a sense of who they are, where they are. I always look at people as whole beings,
Yeah.
and kind of sort of like a vet check-in is how I think of it, right?
Yeah.
The same way as veterinarians always tell their clients, it's important to bring your animal in for a checkup. It's the same thing for veterinarians, right? To come in,
Yeah.
do a check-in, sort of we explore where they're at, what if any support might be helpful to them, and then we take it from there. I'm not a cookie cutter kind of person. Each vet, just like each animal, is their unique being. So there's some similarities and shared
Yeah.
challenges, and then there's some, unique factors as well. And then we take it from there. We decide together. It's always a partnership.
Mhm.
What they think might be most helpful for them.
That's really incredible and so needed. I know you were saying before, like a vet could have have just have had to euthanize a dog or cat or a pet in one room and then go meet a new puppy and have to pull themselves together. So I think a lot of pet parents don't always think that when they're in that stressed out state of mind or things aren't necessarily what they thought it was going to be when they were meeting with the vet. So I always try to tell people to remember that. Imagine if you were in their shoes. So I love that you're offering that. And I could see that being just so needed across the board by so many veterinarians. And hopefully they'll open up to knowing that they need that, right? Because a lot of times we are our own worst enemy, knowing when we need to reach out or not.
Yeah, well, what's that classic that the shoemakers' children have
Yeah.
old worn out shoes. Yeah,
Yeah.
and when you're so stressed and you're in this place of really needing help, sometimes that's the most challenging time to reach out for it. But I really want to encourage people. There's no shame. It's not a sign of weakness in any way whatsoever. It's actually a sign of strength to be able to acknowledge, hey, this is challenging work. This is challenging time. So I'm going to reach out and take advantage of support that's available.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you offer that. That's really great. I hope more people reach out to you for it because I think our veterinarians need as much support as they could get in the next now and after the last couple of years and moving forward. Um, okay, so what has been the most meaningful to you when you have helped a pet parent and or a veterinary client? If you want to share a little story.
Sure. So this is just a beautiful story of a family that came to me when their dog was aging and they were really deciding whether to euthanize the dog or not. And as you can imagine, very painful decision, lots of pain around it. And I talked to the dog with them, and the dog expressed that he was not ready to leave yet. That his while his body was not what it once was, he still had some more living to do, and he loved his family.
Mhm.
And he asked them not to focus so much on his physical body. He was still alert, and
Yeah.
so they decided to support him and stay together as a family. And they actually were together for another year or so. And then
Wow.
I recently heard from them, and they ultimately euthanized him. And then we spoke after they made that decision because, like so many people, there's still questions and regret, and sometimes it
Yeah.
doesn't play out the way many of us have this idea that we're going to be at home and it's going to be peaceful,
Yeah.
and it doesn't always happen that way. And it was just so beautiful because there was so much love there. And that's one of the things I love most about this work is just feeling and being in the presence of so much love that people and their animals share. And so this particular dog was just reassuring his people that, hey, it may not have been the way that you had anticipated it, but this was the way that it needed to be. And in this particular case, um, this was the way that it needed to play out. And it was almost a little easier the way that
Yeah.
it happened rather than if he had been at home, he was with his family at the time. And just, it really opened up a new perspective for the people in terms of how they looked at the whole process. Because very often, what we do as humans, we get in our mind and in spite of the fact that maybe we had 10, 15, whatever, 5 amazing years with our animal, we focus on that last half
Yeah.
hour or those last 10 minutes. And animals typically, and in this case, this animal was so not there. It's like you're focusing on like a drop of water in the whole ocean.
Yeah.
And it was really helpful, I think, for this family to hear the perspective straight from their beloved. They,
Yeah.
sometimes it's one thing if I say it, but if they know that this is coming from their from their animal, it just like you can just feel and hear the sense of relief and peace
Yeah.
because grief um, is really a way that we express our love for our
Right.
animals who passed over. But it's that shame and the guilt and those
Yeah.
toxic feelings that just make it just so messy.
Yeah, it's hard to get over that guilt. I know when my last dog, who's behind us in a portrait,
Mm.
Max, when he lived a year longer than he should have. He had, I have an excellent holistic veterinarian, and he had mast cell cancer, and so I knew when it was time. Like I just knew because he'd been to the vet every 4 to 6 weeks for a year. He was an old guy. He was almost 13, happy, healthy. 13 for an old dog with mast cell cancer. Like he still did his thing and all of that, but the guilt after making that decision, even though I knew it was the right decision, it's terrible. But I look at back at both my last two dogs, and even in my childhood dogs, like all the lessons that I learned from them and the inspiration and all of that. So I didn't hold on to that for too long, but it did take a while to get past that guilt stage. And I think that's what a lot of people really struggle with. And it's hard because we can't wrap our brains around it, right? I could have done more. I should have done more. And, it's like, no, you did everything you humanly possibly could have done. And so, for me, I look back at all the silly things. Like I have a lot of videos of him doing silly stuff, and forget it. Cody's whole life is documented. So, there's a lot there now. But I love that you're able to offer that service and help pet parents get past that, and really go back to the joy of their pet, when they were alive. So it really helps people. Okay, so I'm going to turn the tables a little bit. I have a couple of fun questions for you before we wrap up. What is your favorite thing about working in the pet industry so far? You kind of answered it before, all the love, but is there anything else that you want to point out that you love working about in the pet industry?
I love working with people who get my connection with animals, like who get
Yeah.
that my animals are just as important to me as any human being might be.
Yeah.
That I don't have to explain that or have people look at me funny, like it's a given.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. I love that. You find your peers and your, mutual people, right? Yeah, I love that. And so, what is your daily non-negotiable habit that keeps you as a person grounded?
Walking on the beach
I knew
and
you were
and
going to say
and
that.
yeah, and some form of meditation or quiet time, something that that grounds me and because sometimes my mind can get very busy, and then I'm listening to what the animals want to share. So I try to keep my mind as clear as I can.
Yeah, I love that walking on the beach. I will tell you, every person that I've asked that has alluded to meditation in one way or another on our show so far. So I find it very interesting that everybody is talking about that. So it's pretty cool. And how many pets do you have?
I currently live with one cat named Rocky. Yeah, I live with a number of cats who've over the years have all passed over, so I feel them. They're still
Yeah.
very much with me. But there's one cat left right now in physical form.
Yeah, yeah. Is he the one we've been on Zoom meetings where he's like walking across the front of your screen? It's always so funny. The cats, they crack me up. They're always like, "You're on a Zoom, I'm gonna go right on your computer."
He's in charge, absolutely.
Oh. So is there anything that I didn't ask you about your business and about what you do that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I would just encourage people, to reach out. That very often we don't realize, we underestimate the power of animals and how much they have to teach us, how much to give us in so many different ways. So to really kind of be willing to open up to possibilities. And I think that's, for me, that's why it took me a while to get to this place. Like, it wasn't until Hurricane Sandy gave me the courage to, like, it's time to really step into my shoes and do what I came here to do.
Wow.
Because there's so much of our brain, so much of what's possible in the world that we just don't get. And that's part of what the animals want to teach us, is how much we can create in this world.
Yeah, I love that. That's a really great way to end this. I love that. So, I just want to say thank you again so much for being here and sharing what you do. And your compassion and your kindness beams through the screen. And I think that anybody that is watching should definitely reach out and connect with you. How can people find you?
Well, my website is healingwithanimals.com,
Okay.
and you can contact me right through there. It has my email, my phone number. So whatever way works best for you, I'm here, and I'm more than willing, happy to support you and your animals, because that's why I'm here.
Awesome. Well, listen, Jill, this has been a lot of fun. I always enjoy speaking with you about what you do, and I can't wait to see where you go. And as we were talking, I'm like, oh, I got to ask Jill a couple of things off camera that I think you should be adding to your repertoire of services because you offer so much. But again, thank you so much for being here. And just as a show note, you guys, our next show will be on next week, Tuesday, April 26th at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we're going to be talking with Hector Ocasio of Pet Business Connect. So I hope you guys all have a great day. And Jill, again, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Nancy. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Take care, everybody.